You want your deck to perform correctly, and limited is literally sculpted around that. Greetings, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you are here. Well, in last week's video, I talked about kind of some basics for free-to-play, and I mentioned in that video that, darn it, one of the best ways of being free-to-play in this client is trying to do a bit of drafting. But I didn't follow that up very well, I will admit. Particularly if you're free to play, that often means you're newer to the game. Not exclusively. There are plenty of people who are just like, man, I like the game, but I am in a spot in my life where I can't afford it. Or, you know, maybe you just feel like I already play paper. I don't want to build two different collections. And there's lots and lots of reasons, and your reasons are your own. And to be quite frank, none of my business. So I thought we had a comment in a YouTube video asking, well, what about some drafting basics? Well, okay, so there is just a wealth of help out there for folks who are learning to draft in general, and for each specific set. I am not a limited expert by any means. I have done my share of drafts. I have won my share and lost my share, no question. But I figured I would give you just some basics to get your toes in the water, and then you folks can do that with that information what you will. If you choose to act on it, great. If you're not, you know, darn it, I gave lots of other solid advice in the previous video, okay? So the first thing I want to go over is the way draft works. The way draft works is you get a pile of Magic the Gathering packs, 3 of them to be precise. And at the same time, you and 7 other people, a total of 8 around a table, or in this case, virtual table, will open your pack, 1 pack. You get to look at your cards that you open out of that pack, take 1, and pass. Then everyone else does the same thing, and you continue to pass, taking those, looking, taking a card, until that entire pack is gone. Then you open a new pack and pass the other direction. So there are things to consider. First of all, particularly when you open your first pack. Let's say you have a crazy mythic rare in it, it's awesome, a planeswalker and stuff. That isn't, you know, that's the one you want to take. It's pack 1, pick 1. I'm just taking the most powerful card. That's the one. Send it away, right? No. Try to take note of what else is in the pack, because that will tell you what other people are also doing. So if you take this crazy bomb green, but there were 4 other green cards in the pack, and that pack comes back to you and all 4 green cards are gone, green might not be the place for you to be, right? Because that means there are 4 other people all drafting green. With you, that makes 5 of the 8 want green in their deck. So even though you got this really powerful, crazy card, I mean, maybe it's still worth it. Maybe you just keep getting green. Maybe there's a million green cards that get opened, but it's a point of reference that you need to know about. Same way for maybe you take the green and you pass the pack and there's 3 reds in it, and you get the pack back and there are 0 reds in it. Holy crud, there are 3 red drafters theoretically at the table. Now, people will pivot, people will change, people will do other things, people will put 3 colors in their deck and all that sort of thing. But those are the sorts of things that really will help you up your game, if you have the wherewithal to kind of track that mentally, even just to a little bit, just saying, oh, what else is in this pack? Oh yeah, there was a shock or something, and that is gone. Okay, not a surprise. Shock's really good. You would expect shock to be gone, but maybe if there was something worse, like a regular 2-mana 2/2 in red that didn't have any other abilities, like that's a fine card to have, but you'd really only want to draft it if it was if you were in red solidly and that was the only thing for you there, right? So if that was gone and maybe some other more powerful regular card was still around, very, very notable. So that said, the same goes, you pass the other direction now. So now this person is passing to you, right? So those are the ways it's going to go. You open all 3 packs, pass all the cards, and you then construct a deck with the cards that you picked, 1 at a time. There's a lot of skill that goes into that. knowing when do you abandon. Remember how let's say that original situation comes about. You have this crazy bomb green card, a mythic planeswalker that you take, pick one, pack one, pick one. And there were, let's say, 3 other green cards in there. That pack comes back to you. All the green's gone. Do you immediately pivot? No, well, maybe not. Because darn it, I've got this really, really powerful planeswalker. I want to play that. That doesn't mean that green has to be a big part of your deck, though, right? So it's possible maybe you're just like, well, okay, maybe we'll just splash the planeswalker. Maybe we're going to pivot from being mainly green and then a little bit of red, let's just say, to maybe I'm going to try and go a little heavier on red now, because we're expecting to pick up a lot of red cards, because maybe some red came back in that pack, but we're not expecting to pick up very many green packs. That doesn't mean you have to abandon your powerful card. It might. If you never see another green card, maybe you're not playing that planeswalker. I don't know. Planeswalkers are powerful enough. You're probably playing it anyway, but definitely a point of reference. That's the sort of decisions you're going to have to make after the draft has already taken place, but definitely a thing you need to keep in mind while the draft is taking place. Also, while the draft is taking place, there are a couple of things you want to know. For the most part, you need to be playing a 40-card deck. There are arguments on the topic all the time. Is it okay to play more than 60 cards in your constructed deck? And there's a little bit of yes, a little bit of no. There's some back and forth. For the most part, the consensus is no, you should not. But people are willing to argue. It is worse in limited for the most part. The arguments for and against are typically, yeah, but one card isn't going to change the percentages that much, so playing 61 just isn't that big of a deal. The argument against is, yes, but there is a 61st worst card in your deck. So, if one of them truly is kind of the worst card, cut it, right? That's a lot more prevalent here in limited. You will often be picking up lots of cards that are mediocre at best, sometimes not even very good. And if the draft isn't going your way, you'll end up playing them, but you don't want to, right? Remember that 2-mana 2/2 I was talking about? Doesn't do anything else. You don't want to play that card. But if you don't have any other choice, you will. In limited, I never say never, but there are very, very few times where it is good to have your 41st, 42nd, 43rd card in your deck, because there are almost always a 43rd, 42nd, 41st worst card. Get those out of there so you have a better chance of drawing your good cards instead. There will be times, darn it, where you're in need and you reach for the top of your deck and you pick off that pretty mediocre 43rd worst card. It's good in this situation or that situation, but in general, it's not very good, right? And by taking that off the library, you cost yourself the game. So try your dead level best, stick to 40. In that 40 cards, you want 17 lands, almost exclusively. There are cases to be made for 16 or 18 from time to time. I have built those decks. I have played those decks. Yes, they exist. For the most part, it's 17. You want your deck to perform correctly, and limited is literally sculpted around that. There are casting costs that you need to consider. You need to curve. Curving is very, very important in limited. You typically don't want a ton of 1-drops. 1-drops can be very, very important in constructed, but that's a little different. You typically want somewhere between 0 and 2 1-drops. 2-drops, you typically start, that's kind of where the bulk of your cards are typically going to be. You want between like 6 and 10-ish. As many as like 12, but typically 6 to 10. Then 3-cost cards like 4 to 6, 4-cost cards 3 or 4, 5 at like 2 to 4, then 6-drops and 7-drops you will take as they come. It doesn't hurt to have some in your deck. You will more often just land go, and limited than you will in constructed, and you will have a chance to sometimes cast those 6 and 7-drops where you may be reticent to put them in your constructed deck, but you still don't want too many. You draw into those cards and then can't cast them. They rot in your hand and you die, right? So somewhere between, I don't know, like a max of like 2 or maybe 3 6-drops and probably a maximum of something like 1 or 2 7-drops in your deck typically. Anything over 7, you have to very, very carefully eye. You know, even Mythics that cost like 8 mana or something, I would be very hesitant to play. There are exceptions. I would be playing Ugin, the Spirit Dragon or something, if I was in that limited format. But again, they're the exception rather than the rule. So, getting all that out of the way, you also want to be playing something like 15 creatures. Almost every single limited game is going to come down to attacking with creatures. Milling your opponent does happen relatively often, and it is a much more viable strategy in limited even than it is in constructed. But still, we're talking 95% of games, in most formats, I should say, come down to attacking with creatures. Have enough creatures to win the game, somewhere at 15, I would say. Then you're going to want something like, you know, 8-ish non-creature spells. These come in many forms. Removal spells, combat tricks, card draw, enchantments like creature auras. Target creature gets +2/+2 lifelink and first strike and wonderful crazy things. You still don't want too many, but having a few is good, right? So having that balance in your deck, good. Somewhere around 17 lands, 15 creatures, 8 non-creatures should be the numbers you target for on your end deck build. Okay. I would also try and stick to 2 colors. You can craft monocolor, but oftentimes you won't get enough cards to do it that are good enough. You know, if you draft well enough, you should have pretty good cards in one color and pretty good cards in another color, mash them together, make your deck, right? Yeah, it's true. Maybe if you're the only green drafter and every good green card just keeps coming back to you and you play all your green cards, you can win the draft. Yes, great. 7-0. Well done. That isn't going to happen most drafts, though. So try and stick to 2 colors because it also gives you more flexibility in your, particularly like your removal options and things like that. Which brings me around to my final point, trying to keep this brief. There are draft guides out from a number of very, very fantastic Magic players and things. And they talk about what cards are best in any given format. Oftentimes, the very best cards in any given format are removal spells. Oftentimes, you will open a pack, particularly in Pack 2 or Pack 3, where the mythic or rare, more often rare, like ends up being something really disappointing. So, like a land that is a 2-color land that's rare and it's not in your colors even. All right, if you're just a free-to-play account, maybe you're taking that, to be honest, just to try and fill out your account with all those rares. That's rare drafting is fine, particularly again since this is targeted at free-to-play players. But if your goal is I want to win this draft, you're probably gonna have to pass it. So what else do you take out of that pack? That's where we're at here. The cards that may surprise you are the ones that we'll see very little to sometimes even no standard or historic play or anything. Some of these cards you won't even know existed unless you draft. One of the best commons in M21 over the summer, in any of the colors, one of the best commons, Basri Acolyte. One of the best cards in draft. There were cases people were talking about online where this card was better than almost every rare. It was better than, or in these people's opinion, better than whatever it was, like 75 or 80% of the rares or something like that. You never see this card in constructed. It's arguably terrible in constructed. Yeah, but the meta's different, and depending on what is going on with those cards in that set, can change everything around. Well, why did this matter? Well, because 1/1 counters were very strong in white, because it was a 2/3 lifelink, and the format was relatively fast. Lots of aggro decks. So this blocks well, gains life back, it attacks well, it grows your board well. It did everything you wanted to do in that format. I personally, I don't know, maybe a little skeptical, but I personally didn't feel it was quite as good as some of the hype people were throwing on it. But darn it, there's no question. If it was this card, particularly if I was already in white, and like a dual color land that's not in my colors, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm slamming Basri's Acolyte, and it's not close. If I'm trying to win, of course, right? So this sort of card, pretty unexciting. One of the, or arguably the best white common in Zendikar draft was Nahiri's Binding. Enchanted creature can't attack or block. Its activated abilities can't be activated. I don't think I've ever had this cast against me in Constructed. 60 card regular, no. But yet, this card, is like an A card in the format. Again, much better than a whole bunch of the rares. Much better than a whole bunch of the uncommons and things like that, right? And it's a common. You will see these cards in these formats. Do you take them every time? Heavens no. But you should consider them every time. And note if, for instance, remember I was talking about, you get this green card, it's crazy, it's good, you pass, all the green goes away. The pack comes back to you, and then Nahiri's Binding is still in the pack? Holy crud. There is probably not a single white drafter at the table. You know what that means? Every single good white card is coming back to you. I'm getting in white, right? Okay, it might not mean that. It might mean the people around the table are bad. And maybe they took some other white card that you forgot about, not recognizing the power of Nahiri's Binding. It's still okay. That still means there's probably at most one other white drafter at the table. You're still going to do lots of great things. These are cards people often refer to as something like signposts. They tell you, or they give you information on that. So, and how people interact with these cards will help guide your draft. There are a lot of uncommons that they do this with, oftentimes 2-color uncommons, to tell people, okay, do this thing, draft this way. But make no mistake, there are other cards as well that serve this purpose, similar to Nahiri's Binding. In black, these are some of the best cards from recent sets we had saw. One of the best uncommons, commons in black, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Gets 1 cheaper for every creature in your party. Again, I don't think I've ever had Deadly Alliance cast against me in regular 60 card Constructed, but arguably one of the best cards, even first pickable. When you're looking at the entire pack and there's a rare and it's an underwhelming one, you very well may go for Deadly Alliance instead. As a matter of fact, you may look at the rare and go, yeah, that's playable, but I still want Deadly Alliance, or whatever, right? Pharika Spawn. This card, folks, so strong. Now, this is an uncommon, but this card is so strong, it is actually better than a number of the mythic rares in Ikoria, or I'm sorry, Theros Beyond Death. It is better than the vast majority of all the rares. You may not have ever even seen this in 60 card Constructed at all. But for what it does in the format, it's very, very good. These are the sorts of cards that you need to evaluate on a per card basis, and that will only come with time. Again, similarly, Renata Call to the Hunt, one of the better cards in the entire format. Shock, Scorching Dragonfire, typically the best commons in their environments. Very, very good removal spells. Help you attack with your creatures, things like that. Very strong in blue. A lot of the time, your best creatures are going to typically have like flying, going to draw you cards, going to bounce creatures, opposing players' control, hopefully capitalize on tempo, that sort of thing. And of course, green, typically your best creatures are going to be mana sinks, and most importantly, just big old fat creatures for limited. Very, very good. I'm not sure how much this helped you folks or how much it didn't, but I'm ready to answer more questions. I would stress there are plenty of other good places to go for this kind of content. Limited Resources is absolutely fantastic YouTube channel where Marshall Sutcliffe and Luis Scott Vargas go over all these, but there are plenty of others as well that if this sort of thing interests you, you can definitely go and check them out, and I highly encourage it. That said, I hope it did help some. If you have any questions, please let me know down below, and I will see you next time.